It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we talk the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex and all of its fresh New Year glory. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing all right, man. How about you? How was your holiday?
It's going all right. It's going, as we record this, it's still in between that magical time of Christmas and New Year's. By the time you're listening to it, you'll already be unwrapping the new year, so to speak. But going fine. I always enjoy my midwinter break.
See, everybody asks me what I'm doing for New Year's Eve and all this, and what is, I guess it's a fundamental core part of my being, to be honest. I hate New Year's Eve. It's my least favorite holiday in the world. It's like an extrovert's dream, which is the opposite of me. It's like the time you go party and drink and then get to drive around at 1:30 in the morning. And so my plan for New Year's Eve every year is to sit at home and watch TV, and that's all I ever do for New Year's Eve, which everybody thinks I'm boring for, which is probably fair. So, what is your New Year's Eve plan? Because you're not as boring as I am.
We're not too far off. Well, on the other side of the spectrum, if you are an extrovert and you are used to going out and living a nightlife lifestyle, which at 51 I don't do as vigorously, but I still engage in. New Year's Eve is amateur night, so you kind of sit this one out, right? You let the amateurs take it. So we'll be upstate, so not even in New York City. Have a couple friends and their family over, and basically do the exact same thing and stay in. Make it a little festive, but yeah, you don't go out on New Year's Eve.
I love how you call it amateur night. You mean it's like the people who don't really know how to go out are gonna?
Let them have their night. Let them have their one night. I'll take a Wednesday in a few weeks.
Of course, the real hardcore partiers will be out Wednesday evening in some club in New York City. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. We don't pay price fix for dinner. We don't get wooed in by overpriced fancy cocktails. Shot and a beer types. We've got 364 days.
Alex, my cohort from the Hogsty, said that he's having a New Year's Eve party, but he's doing it on Zulu time, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. If you've heard the term Zulu time, Chris, it's kind of a military. I don't know how Alex knows it, but Zulu time is Greenwich Mean Time.
Right. That I know.
Yeah, and so he's doing a countdown to New Year's Eve on Zulu time, meaning from the East Coast it's 7:00. So by 7:30 he's going to be done, which is brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, no, that's that. Plus you get more. Plus you get the people that didn't want to go out after. So yeah, that's a good idea. Have you ever been? I've straddled and stood on the Greenwich Mean Time one time. It's kind of cool.
I've not ever literally straddled on. I've been in England several times. No, I've never literally straddled the line.
Yeah, they have it all marked off. Yeah, it's like a physical thing.
Is it kind of like the Four Corners, thing?
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, that's a good comp.
Here you're on one day of the year, and here you're on the next day of the year if you step one side to the other side.
Yeah, exactly. It just sort of shows the sort of like how it's all just a concept.
So I would think some English, like the English, would think that that's a bit too kitschy for them,
Well, Greenwich is a little bit like suburban London, so they need to, like any like suburbs, they need to like sort of stake their claim to being something worthwhile.
So they have to have something. So for them,
they have to have something that defines them. Yeah,
it's a timeline that's a made up timeline.
Yeah, come out here, take the tube as they call it out here.
No, I've never done that. Next time I'm there, that may be something to do. That is something I like.
Greenwich is actually a pretty cool little town too, or whatever it is, suburb.
I've never been in Greenwich.
Well, there you go. New life goal, Steve, for 2024.
Yeah, it's one goal is to buy a 59 Les Paul. The other one is to sit on the Greenwich straddle the Greenwich timeline.
Well, you could probably do some pretty good guitar shopping in London, so those two things might be connected.
I just have to sell my house to be able to afford the 59 Les Paul, but it's okay. It might be worth it. Yeah, I could live in a tent for a while, but I'd have that guitar.
Oh, good stuff. Well, speaking of fortunes, Steve. Speaking of fortunes, I didn't know we'd be. I think we figured we'd talk about. Let's see if I get this right now. Snyder. Um,
It's not Schneider,
again,
no.
not not Schneider. Yeah, we figured he'd pop up from time to time, but this one is quite the pop, as we've got a pretty interesting lawsuit bubbling by one of his former minority partners, Rothman, I believe, and things could get a little sticky. I hope Snyder's not, not counting all of those 6 billions quite yet, because his dealings as owner of the franchise that plays in Washington um, doesn't seem to be fully cleanly exited as of yet. All right, Steve, put on your lawyer hat and give us what the hell is going on here.
Yeah, I'm stunned. First of all, Snyder. I said Schneider that time. You're rubbing off on me. It's not good. So Robert Rothman was, as you said, one of the former partners, minority partners for Snyder. And to go back in the Wayback Machine, he and the other couple of minority partners sold their shares to Snyder for $750 million, I believe it was, several years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago. And then Snyder 5 minutes later turned around and started, looking to sell the property at a much higher valuation, dramatically higher. This irritated one Robert Rothman, who's one of those partners, so he just filed a lawsuit. Um, and interestingly enough, it's in the in federal court, of course. It's in the Middle District of Florida, down in Tampa, well away from both. Well, let me back up. The plaintiffs is Snyder, neither Snyder nor the Washington Football Inc. Um, nor the NFL are defendants. The only defendants are a bunch of Bank of America entities. Because Bank of America's got a whole bunch of entities: Bank of America Corporation, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, B of A Securities, U.S. Trust Company. All those are subsidiaries of Bank of America. Those are the only defendants. So Snyder may not have to count his million, keep track of his millions, but he's going to almost assuredly be a witness. So he's probably going to get deposed in this. Interesting that Rothman didn't sue Snyder, to be honest. So what his point here is, and this is a very long petition. It's 45 pages long. But the gist of it here is that Rothman's saying he's been a client of Bank of America's wealth management family and family office practice, which is kind of the rich guy branch of, like, the uber wealthy branch of Bank of America, when you get a lot of personalized service. And he's saying, basically, in simple terms, that Bank of America prioritized, which is my word, Snyder and themselves in a multitude of actions leading up to the sale of the Washington team at the $6 billion valuation. And so the biggest thing to come out of this, I think we didn't know, is that Snyder apparently convinced Bank of America to give a $55 million loan, not in Snyder's personal name, but in the name of the team, meaning the team is the borrower, but never informed the minority partners. Neither Bank of America nor Snyder informed the partners. And as a matter of fact, the bank asked for but did not receive a corporate resolution from the team, and they closed anyway on it, which is Bank of America's fault. So when you do these kind of transactions, you always ask for a corporate resolution from the board of directors of the borrowing entity that says the everybody approves of this. But they never did it because the board of directors includes, of course, the minority partners, including Rothman. And so Rothman, and then he's alleging that he's essentially coerced into selling his minority shares at a much lower valuation, at a $3 billion valuation. And so he's claimed $75 billion, a million rather, dollars worth of damages, which is calculated, basically it's the delta between the valuation he was sold at and the valuation the team got sold at. So that's kind of how it is. So causes of action in this thing, and he alleges. I don't know why the NFL isn't a party in this, and I don't know why Snyder isn't a party in this because he's basically alleging they're all kind of in cahoots to do this. Um, so it's a bit odd to me that he hasn't um, brought them into this yet, but we'll see. It's very early. This thing was just filed on the 27th, so this is brand new, and I had to pull this because it's not even really in the public sphere yet. So I'm flipping through here to get to the cause of action. Sorry. Um, and obviously, then the idea here, by the way, is they're saying Bank of America profited through a bunch of transaction fees. So that's Bank of America's profit. And then you know, Snyder's profit was because he controlled the entire franchise, or the entire franchise, obviously. So here's count one. Count one is a breach of fiduciary duty, meaning Bank of America had a fiduciary duty to act in Rothman's best financial interest. He claims they didn't. Count two is something I didn't have time to look at. Florida Remedies for Criminal Practices Act. I have not had a chance to look through Florida law to know what he's talking about here, but it appears to be that Florida law provides for a civil remedy for violations of a quote pattern of criminal activity consisting of two or more separate, distinct incidents of criminal activity. So that's an interesting one. I haven't had time to look at it yet. um, the third one, count three, RICO. So what RICO is, this is what Trump has been charged with in Atlanta. RICO is an allegation that there is an organization in which the organization itself is acting in a criminal manner. RICO was first created for the mob because Tony Soprano ordered the hit of somebody, but they could never nail Tony. So what they did is created RICO, which says the entire organization is criminally responsible. So that is one other count. And count four is conspiracy by coercion, which is what I said before. He's claiming that the Bank of America entities conspired to coerce him to sell the team. Aiding and abetting of Snyder's breaches of fiduciary duties owed to Rothman. So he's saying that Snyder, as the majority shareholder and the chairman of the board of directors, had a fiduciary duty to his minority partners, which he almost certainly did. Again, but to be clear, Snyder is not a defendant in this, which is weird. Negligent misrepresentation, and then straight negligence. And so that's the basic claim. Chris, your general thoughts before we kind of dive into this.
First of all, it's interesting to me that the first article about this that sort of broke the news. Now you can find it everywhere, but was by Don Van Natta Jr. in ESPN, big time writer. If you're making a Christmas list of thank yous for getting Snyder out of Washington, and then Don Van Natta is on any short list of thank you notes because it's been his reporting, deep reporting that his and others at ESPN. He's usually got some co-writers that have been really hammering the details on this. And actually, it's kind of a victory lap for Van Natta because the 55 million, a lot of the points here were stuff that he was reporting on and breaking really over the last 18 months. So it makes a lot of sense that he would break this story and wrap this all together up in a bow. There are a few omissions here that I agree are very surprising, and it may actually, to me, signal Rothman's goal. One, you already mentioned, both the lack of Snyder or the NFL, named here, is also being sued. To me is bizarre. Doesn't mean it doesn't have some threats towards them or that it could expand, but I think right now it's weird. The other thing that's a little bit of an omission to me here, and that's weird, is that this was not joined by Shar and the other one. So the FedEx dude,
Smith,
yeah, that they're not on this, so it's like got some real holes. And what it signals to me, Steve, is that I think what Rothman is going for here is a kind of a cleaner lawsuit that he probably can bully Bank of America into just settling, and he can get a chunk of the money he thinks is owed, because with the fiduciary issues and like, you didn't tell me and all this, I think he's just hoping that Bank of America will go into its war chest and take out a couple chunks of cash and slide it his way, and he can make up, a little bit of his butt hurt from, basically getting scammed out of the huge payday, and he figures that's the quickest, cleanest route to getting some money back here. And then adding the NFL and Snyder as defendants, and adding his former minority partners in here just complicates his path to a direct settlement with BOA.
Um, yeah, I think that's an interesting thought process because you bring Snyder in, and that ramps up the difficulty level tremendously, because he's famously, infamously known as a guy who never settles anything. He would fight to tooth and nail. The NFL has always acted like, and fair. Full disclosure, I have represented both the NFL and Bank of America, so there's things I can't say in this, and anything I say here is not covered by attorney-client privilege. I'm just going by what's in the document. But I did used to represent both of them. So anyway, yeah, I think the NFL has always kind of acted like the 800-pound gorilla here. So you might be right, but I think it's a lot of money even for Bank of America to want to just slide some cash over and settle it and get rid of it. And it's, I mean, I do think that having a federal court, a federal judge or federal jury say they breached their fiduciary duties in this manner, especially within the private wealth, rich guy office, certainly is not something they want to see at all. And some of this stuff that they're claiming is bad. Like the basics of transactions. Transaction 101 is get a corporate resolution. That's the way that the borrower's on board. And by not doing that, either they were grossly negligent, which their lawyers probably aren't. Listen, I mean, again, I represented them. They don't hire Ma and Pa Kettle to do $75 million loans, $55 million loans. So, somehow they kind of went along with this. So I think they do have some obvious culpability in that. So yeah, I just have a hard time thinking they're going to settle this immediately. Though this is going to be a drawn out affair. They might settle eventually, but I think Bank of America will not go quietly in this. It's too much money.
Yeah, fair. I just think maybe the saber rattling by
It,
Rothman is his goal might be a third of what he's asking for here, and if they negotiate that, I think it's enough risk to Bank of America with it. They'll if they can get the pain number down to something that they can stomach, that'll be their goal.
yeah, maybe so, but it's not going to be immediately. I mean, this is going to go
No,
on for a while.
and who knows who jumps in, because and I remember when Venata and others reported on that $55 million loan that he went backdoor with. That was a big story when it dropped, probably last spring, I think. So it's really what's interesting, if you're just kind of watching this, saga over the last really 3 years, is it does start to fill in some of the gaps about what went on here. And it is clear as day. I mean, everyone knows that these three minority partners got shafted. I mean, we don't need lawsuits to understand that. They're going to need lawsuits to see what they can recoup or what can be, hashed out now. But everybody knew what a boondoggle that was, right? And so questionable on so many levels. And I really think, one of these things has got to take out Roger Goodell at some point, because, the level of string pulling that this guy is allowed to do is just amazing, because it's very clear that Snyder, Goodell via in the NFL, and Bank of America were playing games here and making all kinds of backroom deals, and all of which eventually blew up in Goodell's face. And I think this is another, we talk all the time about the existential threats to Goodell's leadership of the NFL and the NFL in general. And, the cache of emails, the depositions that this would unearth, their shady dealings with covering up their reports and getting him out from his minority owners and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's a lot of people leveraged on the back end of these things. And so, you got if you're Roger Goodell, you got to be like, am I not over this guy yet? But he ensnared himself, so no sympathies.
Yeah, but listen, the NFL has always kowtowed towards the primary owners. I don't think they care that much about or pay that much attention to any of these minority owners. So the idea that Roger Goodell or any NFL commissioner in the league itself would step up to try to defend a majority owner is shouldn't be surprising to anybody.
No, but when they
Because
gave him the sweetheart deal of the, debt ceiling increase and stuff, I mean, it was, I don't know why, I think I know why. I think it's that cache of 700,000 emails, but it was Goodell was in, held his nose and put on his hazmat suit and really, I mean, if Snyder could have helped himself, basically, he should have been smooth sailing from that point on. Obviously did not happen that way, but Goodell did everything he could to give him the golden road out.
one interesting theory I read about this, and I can't take credit for, I can't remember where I got this, but I read this somewhere, but it's not my thought. But um, the NFL, by letting him do all this, may have been there might have been a long game here, which is the NFL kind of wanted to let Snyder hang himself. They approved $750 million of debt in order for him to buy out his minority shareholders. Um, they look the other way with this $55 million in debt because this is still debt against the company, the loan. And so he's burying himself in debt. And look what happened. He actually ended up having to sell. And so, one theory, again, by this person that's not in my head right now, was that the NFL intentionally went along with this to play a long game in order to make him more vulnerable and force him to sell, which is actually what happened. So, that's a possibility. I thought that was a pretty smart theory. Um, if only I could remember who said it. Um, One interesting thing here is that this lawsuit is not filed in Charlotte. So, for those of you who don't understand this, the American banking industry is, for the most part, in Charlotte in terms of major banks, Charlotte, North Carolina, major banks. Bank of America's headquarters there. A lot of financial institutions are there. It's not in D.C., it's not in Virginia. This lawsuit was filed in Florida, in Tampa, which I assume is probably where Rothman is from. It'd have to be. Um, yeah, resident state of Florida. Okay. But it's going to be less favorable to the banks down in Florida than in Charlotte. You know, and it won't be favorable to the team being down in Florida either. So Rothman's playing smart ball with where he filed it too. There is a jury trial to this. There's a jury trial demand. I can't imagine too many jurors would understand too much of this, you know. But if you think about a jury trial, who's the bad guy? The bad guy is always the bank. You get a jury of citizens out there, the banks automatically have kind of a long road to hoe when it comes to presenting their case in front of juries, even against a billionaire. And I didn't do trial work for Bank of America, so I'm not speaking from specific individual experience with Bank of America, but it's tough for banks to do jury. So jury trial in Florida, I think, plays into it a little bit too.
One thing I don't remember which of the because there's all kinds of articles on this. It was a fairly big story this past week. Was possible also criminal liability, and considering that these are fraud charges as well, and they're in. I think isn't this under the jurisdiction and already being investigated in that Virginia federal court? So I
Yes.
also wonder, is that do they use language like that in a lawsuit to continue to see if they're to kind of push for criminal squeeze by the federal government as well, as something out there as a threat? But they're some of the things that are charged here do start to cross the line into actual crimes.
Well, yeah, I don't know how much the feds really care about a civil lawsuit that's filed in terms of their investigation, criminal investigations. But they've one of these counts, count two, is directly alleging criminal activity. You don't. This is the one, the Florida law part that I wasn't familiar with. I'm trying to flip to it again here real quick. By the way, there's a bunch of stories, Chris. If you could cite one of the stories, 'cause I'm looking at the petition here. I don't have the
I
story in
cited the
front of me.
Don Vanetta ESPN,
Don Veneta. Okay, that's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
which is the best one, or
yeah,
the
yeah.
deep,
Okay,
the longest reporting.
yeah. But I'm still flipping here. Count one. Okay, so count two of this petition, and maybe I'll publish this. I'll publish the petition if everybody wants to read it. I'll put it out on Twitter. If that's, I don't know if I can put a document on Twitter, but anyway. So this is Florida Civil Remedies for Criminal Practices Act. Um, Give me one second here. Okay, actually a bunch of they've cited a bunch of federal laws and Florida laws both in this, like federal banking laws, 18 USC, and then some part of the Florida statutes. And so they are alleging violations of federal law here. Um, so I mean, could they be trying to hand a playbook to the feds? Maybe, but my experience is the feds don't really care so much about what goes on in civil court. So I don't think so. Um, and I'd have to read all these Florida statutes. I didn't have time to do that last night. So
I think it's just kitchen sink stuff to sort of, sort of try to push Bank of America to settle, at some point.
yeah,
But it's
but
super interesting.
the gist of it, by the way, is that the gist of the criminal part of it is that what he's defined as the Bank of America enterprises, separate and distinct predicate acts and racketeering activity entitles them to treble damages. So that's where they're going with this. So they're saying that the racketeering, which is criminal activity, racketeering being that all the Bank of America entities got together to shake down these minority partners to enrich themselves and enrich Dan Snyder, is criminal, and therefore then Rothman's due treble damages. And so that's where they're going with it.
I find it interesting that Rothman basically claims that Bank of America kind of force would be a strong word. I don't think that's what the lawsuit says, but basically kind of coerced him, or strongly suggested he invest twice in the commanders, and then kind of like not mismanaged, intentionally kind of managed that not in his favor. And then he got squeezed out in the end, and then they held all that debt because he borrowed from them to buy those shares of the team that they kind of suggested. So yeah, he's got he's really alleging a pretty complex shell game that Bank of America entities ran on him, that seemed to be, at least from where he's claiming, kind of multi-year. Like, don't you want this? Don't you want this? Borrow money to buy this twice, and then they had him kind of ensnared from then on because he was so indebted to them.
Oh, absolutely. And he's using the words coerce. He one of these allegations in here is coercion. He's precisely and specifically alleging that exactly. He is saying that over a number of years, all these Bank of America entities and Dan Snyder were attempting to enrich themselves by illegally coercing Rothman and the other minority partners into selling their shares early, in order to allow Snyder to get more money. And even the loan part, there's loan fees that go along with this. So, it was to Bank of America's interest to do a $55 million loan that the minority partners certainly would never have gone along with. And he's also alleged, and this has all come out before too, that in here that Snyder was using the loan proceeds for all sorts of personal activities, houses and cars and all kinds of stuff. Um, which is, again, it's all the more strange to me that Snyder's not a defendant. And you may be right in that, he's trying to make this clean and fairly simple within context, at least. And bringing Snyder in is a bit much. And maybe Snyder's still floating around on a boat in the Med. Maybe it's too hard to get him served. Perhaps, I don't know. But maybe that. But yeah, they're exactly alleging what you're suggesting. Now, time wise, this is not going to be short. I mean, these lawsuits like this can go on for years. Even if they are trying to push Bank of America into position to settle, it's not going to be immediately. You tend to play the long game with these kind of lawsuits. And Bank of America isn't just going to shell out tens of millions of dollars for no reason, like right up front like this. So don't expect this to be resolved anytime soon. And so we'll keep an eye on this and, kind of see where it goes as the months and maybe years progress.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And who knows if it even expands probably before it constricts. And Goodell, his number one goal here with all of these things is never, ever, ever, ever let that cache of 700,000 emails hit the public. I mean, multiple lawsuits. I mean, that's the biggest threat to Goodell. I wouldn't even say the NFL because they could just can him if they needed to, right? So, and they'll get some blowback. But that Roger Goodell's entire reason to exist right now is to make sure that that cache of emails is never released to the
What do
public
you think?
because
What
that
do
is
you
a house
think
of
is?
cards.
What do you think's in there? You got to
Oh,
speculate.
I think there's probably more stuff that's sort of from a, kind of just bad PR look, the racist, sexist stuff, who knows, correspondences between different people. It already started to touch that one top lawyer in the like drip of the
Jeff
ones we've
Jeff
seen.
Pash.
Right. So I think there's more of that. I think who knows, I'm not saying it directly Colin Kaepernick, but I think that kind of like is there on all kinds of issues, not just that one.
Well,
Is there,
Kaepernick's settled. I mean, Kaepernick
no,
doesn't
but
have
I'm
any more
saying, is
claims.
there other collusion, right? Is there other
Yeah.
evidence of back channel conversations that they claim never happened and stuff? So I think that's another threat. I think you got to also remember there's two huge lawsuits that also touch this potentially where this cache of emails, and that's the Gruden lawsuit, obvious for obvious reasons, but and then also I think the Brian Flores lawsuit too. So like, does it just open them up on those two lawsuits if we can somehow get our hands on that email. Plus, they know what opens them up to lawsuits that none of us can even think about right now, just knowing
Yeah.
what's in that email cache. So I think it's that his number one job is to never ever let that hit the public air because I think that just opens them up to so much risk. And it's kind of funny, Steve, if you've kind of followed the storylines where he might skirt good at the Gruden and Flores lawsuits because one, there's all kinds of rumors that the Raiders might welcome Gruden back as head coach.
Can you
Uh,
imagine?
so and I'm sure that's contingent on him dropping the lawsuit. And Brian Flores, after the job he's done with the Minnesota Vikings defense, is easily, put all the lawsuit and his past job just for a second, just put it in a vacuum. He would easily be on any short. There's potentially 8 to 10 jobs opening as head coach in the NFL. They need bodies. So and he would be, he took the Minnesota defense from crappy to very good in a year with the same players. So he'd be on anybody's short list. Could you imagine if both those guys become head coaches and just basically buying them off with head coaching positions wipes those two lawsuits away?
Yeah, it would be hilarious. And I had not heard this rumor. I don't know if you were citing something. You're just
Oh
speculating.
no, it was a mid December. There was what's Davis was saying that there's interest on both sides and that's what they would like to do, and obviously it would be contingent on the dropped lawsuit. So at that point, in without that lawsuit, the NFL might be like, you're not bringing this racist back or whatever. But if the NFL would sidestep any of its quote unquote concerns if it meant Gruden drops the lawsuit.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean the Brian Flores. It's been a while since I read it, but the gist of the Brian Flores lawsuit is he's alleging that the NFL discriminates and it's against black coaches in its hiring practices. That was what the Brian Flores lawsuit
Right.
was
So
all
if he's
about.
the new coach of the New Orleans Saints, then
It kind of
then
alleviates
you
that claim.
right, and he'd
Yeah,
drop it anyway. I think so.
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And but listen, in a lot of NFL people and coaches are a bunch of meatheads too. There's no telling what people like that put in emails. This is not like a normal business office, where you stick to business. There is no telling what a bunch of meathead football players put in emails, and the NFL knows what's in there. They've gone through it all already, and so you're right. There's God knows what could possibly be said. And even if it doesn't directly impact the Flores lawsuit or the Gruden lawsuit, there's almost definitely a bunch of totally inappropriate things in there.
Yeah,
you
we're just
know.
dealing with the lawsuits that we know.
Yeah, and most people are, maybe it could even be like somebody's asking a cheerleader to, go sleep with them or something. I mean, people like this are not generally smart enough to keep personal business out of emails. So it could be anything under the sun. So yeah, I do think job number one is to keep the cache of emails out of the public for sure. Yeah, absolutely. But that ought to be a pressure point for Rothman to wrap up the Rothman thing. Put the you know, put the NFL in there as a defendant, and then your number one discovery point is the cache of emails. There's your first request for production emails.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's odd that they aren't named, but we'll see. This story is not going away
Oh
by
no.
any by any measure.
Hashtag
Um,
content.
yeah. So this is, no, it's past rumor because both sides have admitted this, but there is an interesting new media deal bubbling. It was reported all over the place. Just Google this; it's everywhere. But around December 17th, 18th, 19th, it was reported that Amazon is in pretty deep negotiations to buy Diamond Sports, which runs the Bally Sports regional network, which has 40 contracts with NHL, NBA, and Major League Baseball teams for their broadcast rights. Now, we've talked a number of times over this past year, and really we're telling a lot of you that are sort of paying attention to this, that these regional sport networks, that including Diamond Sports, that were filing for bankruptcy and struggling, and would baseball create their own streaming service to pick up how you couldn't watch these games, and all kinds of different stories. And regional sports networks imploding was a real threat, and still is. However, this is a really interesting development, because you can imagine if Amazon just buys or licenses or whatever the deal would be with Diamond Sports. Not only would it allow Diamond Sports a path out of bankruptcy, insolvency, and all of that, obviously, um, but this makes way too much sense for Amazon, because what they would do is, instead of having to go out there and necessarily be in this NBA contract, or go out and like act like more of a traditional network, and sort of negotiate for broadcast rights, they would just pick at this up, become the at least national leader in streaming 40 pro sports teams, because and then immediately then be seen as a massive distribution channel for sports content, with both regional allegiances and national interest. It would be, taking a little dropper and dropping a couple drops, in changing the chemical balance of that bucket that you drop in incredibly. It goes from Amazon being a wants to be, and with the NFL obviously, but this would put them immediately in the top media broadcast sports players in existence, at least in the United States, and then you could make a case for even looking at international rights from there as well. If this happens, it's a massive deal in the world of sports business, and you have to give credit to the I don't know his CEO's name off the top of my head, but the dude at Diamond Sports. I mean, to go from where they were, and they end up on the other side, still managing, right? Still even being able to keep their corporate brand and their entity alive. That would be pretty amazing. That would be quite a turnaround.
Yeah. eh, I'm telling you, Amazon needs to watch out for the monopoly claim. I mean, it's coming. I know it's coming.
This
Break
doesn't
up.
help.
No, it certainly doesn't. To have them take over sports doesn't help. So the link that Chris found on this originally was from something called sportspromedia.com, which I'm not that familiar with, to be honest, but sportspromedia.com. Amazon in talks to invest in Diamond Sports Group's Bally Sports Regional Sports Networks, December 19th, by Steve McCaskill. I wonder if that's a relation to Claire McCaskill, the senator. Anyway, yeah, so the idea here is that Diamond Sports has all kinds of regional sports rights, baseball, basketball, hockey around the country, and they've been in a ton of trouble. We did at least one story on this a while ago. And so if Amazon invests in this, then basically, then everybody around the country has to go to Amazon to get all of their regional sports. And not only that, you could um, get them anywhere in the country, presumably. If you want to watch the Seattle Mariners and you're in South Florida, you go to Amazon. If you're in Seattle and you want to watch the Amazon, the Mariners, you still have to go to Amazon. And so this is even more so, I think, than the NFL, Chris. This is a massive, would be a massive expansion of Amazon's standing in broadcasting. By taking all this over. Um, I, I just don't know how. I mean, I'm just stuck on the antitrust claim. I don't know how this company. I mean, I don't know how they this has antitrust hadn't come up with these people. I really don't understand it. But I don't. There's not really any numbers in this story here. They mentioned that their deal with the NFL was 1.2 billion a season. But the story does not mention how much we're talking about here. But remember that what Chris is talking about, the CEO of Diamond deserves credit and all that, is because they're in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So Amazon's basically an angel investor, here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, and it says Diamond had $8 billion in debt. That's why they had to file bankruptcy. So if Amazon can come and rescue all that and then grow their platform and basically become the new ESPN, more or less like the primary source of sports in the United States, that's just a massive, massive win for Amazon, I think.
Huge, huge. And if then, and you can imagine, let's say this happens, and again, and this was now what was it interesting, and this story was everywhere. Wall Street Journal, everybody reported on this, and that means that both Diamond Sports and Amazon were okay with the details of the story, right? This wasn't. This was meant that this was almost a planned release of this interest, which means it's not the talks aren't just beginning. There's some maturity to the level of these talks, and I think if you were to kind of make a bet, I'd bet on this eventually happening. It'll take a little while, but if you let's say this goes down, you add this to the NFL, you could see a year from now because Amazon Prime is already about to raise prices in this January, so that it's already going up. I could imagine Amazon strategy is there's Prime, which you just need, and then there's Prime Plus or Prime Sports Package. To me, this then allows them to bundle where you wouldn't even get access to Seattle Mariners or whatever in the basic Prime price, which I think is up
Must
to
pay more.
yeah. So this also gives Amazon the upsell to sports packages with that much sports content to bundle.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of wonder, to be honest, why they haven't done that yet with the NFL since they've had a lot of success with Amazon. Maybe there's a plan for it. Maybe in the next year or two, there's going to be the sports bundle. Maybe they wait for this diamond package to go through. But I can't imagine that at some point they're not going to have like a plus level, sports thing of some extent. And I swear I'm going to be the only one in the country without an Amazon Prime membership. It seems like at this point. I just refuse. I'm not doing it. It's the only way I can watch the Dodgers. I because I'm just not going to watch the Dodgers. I guess. Uh, you know, um, Amazon has got to be run by, and I don't necessarily know if this is Bezos, but I know that Bezos is a real forward thinker. Amazon has got to be run by some of the smartest business people around. If you just kind of think about where they started with where they are, if you go back, how long has it been? 20 years, maybe? Is that how long Amazon's been around? Um, they started as an online bookseller, basically a bookstore that lost money every single year, and Bezos never cared because he had a long game, and they've gone from basically a bookshop to controlling 75% of the internet, being a significant player in broadcasting, the marketplace for nearly every product you could imagine, and crushing the competition. It is a true success story. A true business success story. You got to tip your hat to them.
They actually they officially founded under the name Cadabra, okay, as an abracadabra, in 1994. Now that's that just means there was an entity. So that's kind of a probably the earliest, and it's kind of a little bit dubious, but that's what the internet says everywhere in their history was that the July 5th, 1994.
That's Cadabra, though.
Yeah, but I guess the same corporate entity that eventually became Amazon.
Fair enough. Okay, so it's 30 years old then, not 20. But my point is the same. They start as a tiny little online bookseller, and look what they've become. Because they're a major player, I guess, in entertainment. I don't watch it because I don't have it, but there are a ton of there's a ton of original programming that's highly rated, highly watched, highly respected on Amazon now. And then you throw sports in it because it's not just a couple teams, it was 40 teams around the country is what Diamond Sports Group has. And it
And
looks
there'll be
like they're not.
teams lined up to join that, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And especially, I mean, it's a larger audience for everybody. If everybody around the country can get it, as opposed to just the people within striking distance of the local TV station or whatever, that's a huge plus. So it's and I don't think it didn't appear to me, Chris, that this was a purchase and acquisition of Diamond. It looked like this is an investment and partnership with it, wherein Diamond still does it and produces it, and Amazon just broadcasts it. That's
Yeah,
what it
which
seems
is
to me.
even better for Amazon.
Yeah, they spend less money and they don't have
Yeah.
to do anything. They just take it and list the programming. So we'll see what happens here. I do agree with you that the way it leaked, the way the especially like the Sports Pro Media story is really down the middle. Um, it's not taking sides. It's not leaking too much. It does seem like I don't know if I'd call it a planned leak, but maybe I do call it a planned leak. They knew about it. They kind of approved of the story getting out. So I
Yeah,
guess
they
I
were
am
ready for
agreeing
the
with that.
public to know. They were ready
Yeah.
for this to be
Yep.
out there.
Yep.
We'll see. We'll see if a deal comes through. I think they kind of have a bit of a tick, tick, tick to the kickoff of the Major League Baseball season. Might be like a good, because theoretically you'd want this in place for that, because there's a lot of teams that are sort of in the, kind of in this mushy middle, and Major League Baseball stepped in and yada yada. So I could see that being a bit of a goalpost. I keep using football references for baseball, but that could be a
We're in the
goalpost.
seventh inning. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. To get this done. So, was that April 1st is traditionally the kickoff of the Major League Baseball
That's
season?
not a lot of time, though. I mean, being a veteran of these type of deals, not media, but other transactions like this, that's not a ton of time to get a massive deal done. So
Yeah,
they
so
need
I'm
to
wondering how
hurry.
far this is down the road. So
Yeah,
this
it
this will
doesn't
be
really say.
interesting. This will be really interesting. This will be a Q1 sports media story, I'm guessing, maybe Q2, but they're going to need to get this wrapped up at some point, or it falls apart. But this is definitely one to watch.
Or maybe they're aiming for next basketball season and next basketball hockey season. Yeah, I don't know. But either way, they want to get it done quickly, for sure. And it doesn't say how much money we're talking about, by the way, or anything. Nor does it say, as you said, how far along they are, so we don't know. So there'll be
I,
more
I
on
do
this.
wonder about if this is real. I wonder if this takes Amazon out of the bidding for the NBA rights deal.
Well, sure.
'Cause
Why would they want that? And
well, they still
by
might want to replicate the game of the week type of thing for Prime. But yeah, I think my guess would be that they would then take a step back from those negotiations, which by most accounts they were predicted to be the probable new entity. Most people think the incumbents, which is that TNT, NBC, no, not NBC, TNT and ESPN and whatever is the NBA rights now. The incumbents is supposed to probably lock that in with one new player, and most people thought Amazon would be the new player. It'd be interesting to see how that scrambles it.
Yeah, Amazon's got to be the biggest company that's ever existed, even adjusting for time at this point. In a free country, I'm not talking about, a communist country controlling everything, but in a free market economy, has there ever been adjusted for time a larger, more influential company than Amazon?
We'll
I don't
see.
know.
No, it doesn't
Yeah, I
seem like
don't
it
know.
right now.
Yeah.
Um, all right, last story before we do some predictions for sports business stories of 2024 to watch on is a kind of interesting one in that you might have noticed this happened a couple weeks ago. Mark Cuban has sold the controlling interest of the Dallas Mavericks, yet is still a minority owner, and even probably more importantly, still retains full control of basketball operations for the Mavericks. So he'll still be sitting courtside, basically. And what a and he sold to the Sheldon Adelson widow. And so they basically going into business together. But I don't know if I've ever seen a kind of deal here where the majority owner sells, keeps still a pretty big interest in the team financially, and retains management of the team, and basically changes nothing except that he took a major cash out on the investment, which now I think they're saying it is estimated the team's around in the 4 billion range, and he bought it for 200 million and change. So he basically cashes out, keeps his job, and keeps himself in line for future cash outs. uh, that's a pretty good deal on Shark Tank there, Mark Cuban.
Yeah. I know I've never seen a deal like this. And when I first saw the headline for this, I didn't think it was anything special. Mark, okay, Cuban sells the team to someone else. We've seen that before. But this is really, really different, man. And I've seen Cuban talk in the media and so forth in recent months and years that he wants to spend more time with the family and whatnot. And so this is obviously a way to do that. But it's the best of both worlds for him. He cashed out, so he earned a big chunk of cash. He doesn't have to deal with the business operations of the team anymore. Yet he still gets to entertain himself by playing with basketballs. That's like the absolute best of every world. And by the way, so Sheldon Adelson, the widow is a Miriam Adelson, Dr. Miriam Adelson. I don't know if she's a medical doctor or if she's what, but he was a big Vegas guy. And so there's a gambling component to this also here. And so, well, a couple things. One, this I'm reading Bleacher Report. NBA Board of Governors approves Maverick sale from Cuban to Adelson Dumont families by Joseph Zucker, dated 27th of December 2023. So that's the source. Um, but one, he says this is an all cash deal. Miriam Adelson cashed out a bunch of stock in the Sands because her husband was the Mr. Vegas, and paid some other cash, and so it's the biggest cash transaction in NBA history. No loans. But more importantly than that, um, there are provisions apparently in this agreement about gambling, and which is addressed in here. Um, this says in the event the state of Texas legalized sports gambling, he, meaning Cuban, told Townsend the mission would be housing the organization at a new arena in the middle of a resort and casino. And the Mavericks would then partner with the Vegas Sands, which is, Adelson's still the biggest shareholder there. So they are they are banking on gambling to become an even bigger part of the game. Just go back 10, 15 years ago, and that was, uh, nobody wanted to touch gambling. Now people are buying and selling teams expressly for the opportunity to ingrain them in gambling. So it's how far we've come. But this might be the most interesting sale I've ever seen of a sports franchise.
Yeah, no, I remember when this was sort of like in talks, and it was leaked or released or reported on that he would retain basketball control. Because at first I was a little different. I was like, oh, why would Mark Cuban ever sell the Mavericks? I thought that was like his whole identity, you know? So I read the article. I'm like, oh, that's why, because he just gets a giant payout and keeps his job, you know? So it's almost like, I know obviously this isn't totally the same, but to me, it reminded me of someone who has a house that's paid off. It's worth way more than they paid for it, and they're going to take loans against that house, while and other people will then own it, or own chunks of it, but you get to live in it and remold it in your fashion. So
Well,
I'm like,
it's
this.
kind of like they're renting out the garage apartment to the maintenance guy. I mean, because Adelson and the other person, Dupont, well, not Dupont, the other Dumont, they're going to run the business part, which clearly bores Cuban, and he still gets to do the Maverick, the basketball stuff. And don't think he's not still going to be the face of the franchise. he's running basketball operations and he's a celebrity and he's on Shark Tank. So he still gets the, narcissistic attention. He still gets basketball. He just lets somebody else run the thing. And he's still going to make money because he's still a minority shareholder and he's still cashed out to the tune of whatever the net of 3.5 to $4 billion is.
Well,
Yeah,
congratulations, Mark Cuban.
he pulled off the ultimate Shark Tank deal. But actually, if you want to think about it like that, Mark Cuban just brought in a shark to run his business for him and allows him to keep playing in the sandbox. I think he's
Yeah.
learned something from himself.
Yeah, totally. So, hats off to you, Mark Cuban. We'll see how this goes. I mean, um, I guess he could easily be jettisoned. I guess he did give over that eventual power, but who knows? I
But
don't
he's
think
still a
there's a.
minority shareholder, though.
Yeah, you're right. He gets paid anyway. He ensured it that he's getting. He already got paid, and he's going to get paid again no matter how this goes forward.
And he's
Well,
clearly the Jerry Jones of basketball in terms of running the owner, running the team, and everything. He's been intimately involved in it in the basketball operations. He's going to continue to be so. So he hasn't screwed up the Mavericks too bad yet. There's not really a reason to think he's going to screw it up now.
No, I would guess he's going to be fine.
Yep.
So, Steve, we're at the point where we need to make some predictions for the stories or the things we'll be talking about in the show in sports media and business coming in 2024. I sprang this on you, so I'll go first, Steve, to
Okay.
let you have a couple more minutes to come up with yours. I am predicting, similar along the lines of this Bally Sports, Diamond Sports, Amazon deal, I am predicting a massive merger in the world of broadcast streaming that will completely shake up the sports world. And I am predicting that whatever they call themselves, Discovery, Max, whatever, David Zaslav is the most, it's Zaslav Co. Will merge slash buy conglomerate with the Paramount Group, which is CBS, Showtime, other entities, into a massive streaming platform that will have huge implications on sports and becoming basically the new cable will be the goal, which sports will be a key of. So by this time next year, I think we will be talking about not Paramount and Max. It will be talking about David Zaslav basically controlling all of CBS's empire, all of the Warner, Discovery, HBO, CNN empire, and that will be a massive streaming broadcast company.
You think he's just going to call it all Z, so then we can have X and Z?
It would not surprise me if it was that level of dumb.
Because it's kind of like the ultimate level of narcissism. Just we're going to call it Z. I'm Z. Everything is Z. For like Elon Musk, it seems a bit narcissistic too. We're calling everything X. I think that'd be funny if nothing else. So yeah, I think what we're going to see for me. I think last year I said NIL. It was mine when we did this, but this year I'm going with the disappearance of Live Golf and the merger of the PGA with some other investor. We talked a lot about the Live Golf this year. We did a couple stories, and we also declined to do a couple intermediate stories in here because there has been Live Golf stuff in here. But the PGA has gone away from a little. The PGA made it known through media leaks that they were now negotiating with other folks, and so I think from what I can tell, the Live Golf is getting no ratings, not very little viewership, very little participation in terms of fans, and so I actually think that by this time next year, we're going to have seen the PGA pull out of Live Golf completely, drag in new investors, reorganize itself to give players more of a stake in it, and have Live Golf disappear. That's mine.
Well, there you go. We'll track these through the coming year. There's some interesting ones, and I'm sure there's a ton of stuff we have no idea, and we'll be completely shocked and surprised by.
Probably so.
And we have, which we hope for. That would not be a negative, although we'd like to see our predictions come true.
The biggest prediction I really have is that Steve Thomas is going to win the Powerball lottery.
Okay.
I get laughed at when I say that. Oh well.
Write that one down.
It's coming.
All right, so Steve, I imagine you are in deep off-season mode, and the interesting part of the season here will be coming up in a couple weeks on the Hogsty. But I'm sure you're slogging through these games that literally nobody wants to play, apparently, including Jacoby Brissett.
I know. Yeah, I just cringe this time of year when I have to write these game previews because it's like, okay, do I really care? Does anybody really care? No. But yeah, we're slogging through it on the Hogsty. We're in 90% off-season prediction mode at this point. But we have all, in the form of regular written content, and we have the Hogsty podcast, which is released every Thursday. So please check it out.
There you go. So it'll be exciting when we're on GM Coach Watch here. That'll be some good intrigue. So
10
just hold
days.
on for a couple weeks.
Yeah, 10 days. 10 days.
All right. We will see you in a few weeks. Happy New Year.